Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's eSpeaks, we're talking about cloud native technology. We'll look at some of the challenges and also the potential of cloud native, and we'll talk about how to improve your company's cloud native deployment. To discuss that, I'm joined by one of cloud computing's leading experts. With me is Bernard Golden, Executive Technical Advisor at VMware. Bernard, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today.
So, cloud native, it's a moving target to be sure. I mean, what is your sense of where businesses are with cloud native? I've read mixed reports. Some companies like good old lift and shift. I mean, are companies really embracing cloud native?
Yeah. So one question might be, so what is lift and shift, or what is cloud native?
Right.
And probably a good jumping off point is Heroku originally named 12-factor apps. They listed a set of 12 factors that were things like don't have storage on the execution environment, meaning within the virtual machine. And there's a whole range of them. And that's what I generally speak of cloud native. You can think of them as commonly as they have architectures and processes around partitioned applications, so-called microservices. They are very dynamic. They don't assume stability of infrastructure, a whole range of things with that. And your question is, where are we with that? And what I would say is those techniques, those kinds of design patterns, those kinds of operational practices are spreading across the industry somewhat inconsistently depending on the user. So if you look at companies that you might think of as cloud native companies, or purely online companies like a Netflix, a Lyft, there's just a whole
Right.
range of them, huge numbers of them. They
Sure.
pretty much are, so to speak, born in the cloud, and they follow those practices really from very early on. Those are much that way. If you look at mainstream enterprises, there's commonly less consistency across their entire application portfolio. Some of their applications do follow these kinds of practices or aim to follow these kinds of practices. Generally, those are the applications that are most likely to be required to operate in the kinds of conditions that these sort of cloud natives, so highly dynamic user loads, so or frequently changing. So digital marketing is often a place that these kinds of application techniques are applied early on within the portfolio of an enterprise. We're seeing, and broadly speaking, even traditional applications, companies are thinking, I really need to get out of the traditional way I've managed these, because they suffer the very, all the challenges of traditional enterprise applications. And they kind of go, I need to get to the next step with this. I need to go to cloud native with them. So inconsistently spread across the portfolio, depending on the industry, depending on the company, typically with inside the portion of the portfolio that is more like those kinds of digital native applications that I talked about, or cloud native applications, but with an ambition and aspiration to spread it more widely across the entire portfolio.
So we can say that cloud native is not really a binary. You're not all the way cloud native, or you aren't. Although some companies are all the way cloud native, but some companies are partially there. Maybe one division truly is. One division is partially there. Simply having microservices and Kubernetes doesn't make you cloud native, but it might be close.
Well, I mean, it's a what's the necessary but not sufficient. And I wrote about this in one of the pieces that I did for you, which was why cloud means cloud native.
Yep.
And there's a whole range of practices that I outlined in there. The platform, a dynamic platform that can support frequent updates, commonly around containers like a Kubernetes. Yes, I mean, that's frequently associated with it. You might even say it's the ongoing assumption of the foundation. But as I said, there's a whole range of architectural practices and operational practices that really need to surround that. And you need to have all those things to really get to the kind of cloud native applications that support the kinds of use cases that we've mentioned.
Would you also agree that not all companies in all situations really should be cloud native. Maybe there's an executive out there and he or she is thinking, we need to be cloud native in this division. And you might say, actually, no, it's not going to help you that much. Agree or disagree?
Well, I mean, I think it depends a lot on the nature of the application and the nature of the use case and the requirements, the operational requirements. So, excuse me, if it's an application that gets a once a year update that has a very stable user population, probably doesn't need those kinds of techniques. If it's an application that, is going to be changing once a week as you change your promotional programs, or that experiences very highly dynamic load, or that has some characteristics that require it to be deployed into environments like public cloud providers that do not guarantee stability of infrastructure, then that probably does need to go that way. And one of the things that I talk with many enterprises about is making a portfolio assessment. And then defining, getting a set of criteria, and then saying, let's look at the portfolio, the application portfolio, and divide it into what needs to be cloud native, what needs to be, somewhat modernized, what can be, sort of bundled into a container, what needs to not change at all, and maybe remain just as is. And then you've got a work plan that kind of says, this is where I need to make my investment to go cloud native. This is a place where I don't need to make a lot of investment, and you can make an investment set of scenarios and so forth to support that.
So you're out there advising executives about the cloud. As a business grapples with this move toward cloud native, what advice would you give them?
Well, really what I've just outlined, identify the applications that really require cloud native capabilities, and then start with, one or a handful, and prove out the patterns, generate organizational learnings, and have a commitment to say, and then I'm going to grow upon this initial tranche. I'm going to, maintain that within the portion of the overall portfolio that I identified as needing that. So let's say 25% of your application portfolio really needs to be transitioned, needs to be modernized. You start with a handful of that to 25%. So that's probably 1% or 0.5%. You execute on those things, you learn, you set up practices, and then you say, okay, now let me do the next tranche, the next 10, let's say. And then you take that 10 and then you move it to 25. And it's an incremental kind of growth pattern. That's the way I would suggest going about it. And have a plan to share those organizational learnings, share those practices across the organization as it embraces that.
Is there typically a problem that a lot of companies do have with cloud native? Like, oh, we've adopted it and now we're shocked by the cost, or we've adopted it and we're concerned about security, or we've adopted it and it doesn't move quite as fast as we thought. I mean, is there a default headache that companies face?
Well, I think a lot of times, I mean, the thing that I think most organizations are challenged with is they hope, or they have been told, that there's an easy path to get there. And compared to traditional practices, this is a kind of a different set of practices, typically different tooling, of course, but also you have to analyze your overall pipeline of how do you develop applications, or how do you manage the process of applications, and analyze that and say, where are my bottlenecks? Where do I need to improve those things? Where do I need to invest in automation around some of these things? I think it's easy to overlook the amount of investment it will require, or the amount of work to build a supporting substructure, if I can use the term, to support individual applications. I liken it to when Henry Ford first brought mass assembly to automobiles. It wasn't necessarily that he had a different automobile that he was building, but he had to create an entire system to
Right.
build automobiles, the assembly line. And
Right.
what did that require? That required parts to be delivered at the right time. That required certain skills. There's a whole range of implications. And I think that many times organizations charge in without really thinking through, okay, what are the supporting capabilities that I'll need to do this?
So you might say to them, planning. The one word is plan this and think about the possible pain in terms of cost and complication. Be aware of that.
Well, you definitely should plan for it, and you should develop a program around this. And as I said, the first step is you analyze the portfolio. Then you take that tranche that you want to modernize, and you sort of start with a set, and you say, what will it take for me to become that? I can do updates 3 times a day, that I can push them automatically, that somebody checking code in triggers the rest of these other processes. I was just talking to a large enterprise today, and they said, oh, we really need help around automating our testing because our QA is still manual. So even though a developer can turn out lots of updates, they still have to go through this very time-consuming manual process, which gets in the way of rolling out more frequent updates. So, you might take a look at that sort of thing and go, okay, what's going to need to be changed? So, but yes, you're right. That can all be summarized in one word called planning.
Well, let's look at the VMware Advantage. I mean, how does VMware enable cloud native? You're out there as a VMware exec advising companies. What do you say? Like, why does VMware matter in this sense?
Well, VMware recognized that the nature of enterprise computing is changing. And it has a very successful business in helping people use infrastructure more efficiently. So it's very well known for virtualization, for software-defined data centers, and so forth. That work is largely kind of in place and capable, and and the action, so to speak, within enterprises is moving to applications. How do I get all those things that we outlined at the very beginning of our discussion here? So about maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, VMware acquired Pivotal. And Pivotal was a company that had a product called Cloud Foundry, which was a Pivotal Cloud Foundry that was a application environment to build cloud native type applications. It bought Pivotal. Pivotal had acquired a company called Heptio, which was a Kubernetes oriented company started by the people who really designed and built Kubernetes in the first place. And so Pivotal brought those kinds of characteristics of the way it built applications to Kubernetes. It now has, meaning VMware, has now within that product set, it renamed it Tanzu and has a couple of products. One is Tanzu Kubernetes for Operators, TKO, which is really, if you want to build cloud native applications and have those capabilities outlined, you need a platform so that developer and application groups can self-service, so that you can monitor and observe these things, the applications are running, that you can do updates of the platform itself because Kubernetes is always being improved, whole range of things. So it's got that for platform groups. And then it has a product called Tanzu Application Platform, which is basically a set of tools that are designed for application developers. And so it has a thing that basically provides them with a thing called app accelerators, which could be thought of as frameworks. So a developer doesn't have to start from scratch. They can kind of go, I'm going to build a Java app. It's got to have these kind of capabilities. They pull it out of a catalog, and they have that environment right in their IDE. It's got a build service that automatically builds off of any code changes that get done. It's got a supply chain mechanism so that it can validate these kinds of things. So there's a set of products that the company has built and offers for organizations. I would say it's primarily enterprise focused to help enterprises get to the things that we need, that we are talking about they need to do.
Mhm.
And of course, Tanzu also has Tanzu Labs, which was formerly known as Pivotal Labs, which is an organization that's been around for 25 plus years,
Hmm.
helping companies adopt cloud native practices. So it's a consultancy around, it's, so to speak, the old line about I can give you a fish, you can eat for a day, I can teach you to fish. It's a
Right.
teach you to fish organization
Hmm.
helping companies learn cloud native practices. So the
Hmm.
combination of the TKO for the operators, for the platform people,
Mhm.
TAP for the people who are developing applications, and then a set of services to help people really embed those products and those processes into their organization. That's what VMware brings to the table to help companies as they adopt cloud native practices.
Interesting. When you think about when you zoom out for the big picture of VMware through the decades, I mean, we go back to the days of Diane Green, and
Mhm.
I mean, the legacy of VMware was, of course, virtualizing your data center. So it was sort of the king of the data center.
Mhm.
And I think some might have thought, well, when the cloud era dawned, what's going to happen with VMware? But it appears that VMware has become this bridge to the cloud. Its entire sort of modus operandi has shifted with the years. Agree, disagree?
Well, I mean, I think you're exactly right in that, you know, a very large proportion of applications in the future will run in public cloud environments.
Mhm.
And, VMware wanted to work with its customers that want that. And, most companies um, don't go all in on public cloud. They don't say, I'm going to run everything up in Azure or AWS or GCE or Alibaba or whatever it might be.
Right.
They commonly have a distributed application portfolio, some on-prem, some in those environments, some in multiple hyper cloud providers.
Mhm.
And so VMware said, to help our customers in those environments, we need to uh, make our portfolio broader, our offerings, a greater breadth of offerings
Mhm.
to enable our customers to be successful. Um, and that's so that's the way it's gone. And really now the company's primary focus is really, as I said, this applications, because applications is where um, enterprises are increasingly focused.
Right.
And so um, application modernization and supporting multi-cloud is really where the company is focusing a
Mhm.
lot of energy right now.
Well, let's look to the future of cloud native. When will we get to the point where we no longer even say cloud native? It's just cloud because we don't need that adjective after the noun cloud. I mean, when is cloud native going to be the default cloud deployment?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure that cloud native will ever be the default.
Hmm.
I think it could be the default for net new applications,
Right.
but I think there'll be an incredibly long tail of you know already existing applications that provide value but can't justify the investment needed to bring them to full cloud native capabilities.
Hmm.
And so there'll be a very long um, path forward for those kinds of applications.
Hmm.
And and they'll still need to be occasionally updated. They'll still need to be managed. They'll so forth. So I expect that it won't ever be all cloud native.
Hmm.
um, and we can just look at mainframes are still around, even though
Right.
people have um,
Right.
predicted their demise for decades, I think.
Sure.
um,
So really,
uh,
all the technologies are still with us. We've moved on, and yet they remain. It's almost like, I think I use the analogy of a smoker. He maybe didn't even give up smoking. He's on the Nicorette gum, then he's on the patches. He's on all the solutions at one time somehow. I'm not sure that analogy works. I've always thought about
yeah, it's not as a
that.
positive a thing, but
True.
um, I mean, it's maybe it's like you one gets acquainted with and develops a real liking of sushi. That
Right.
doesn't mean you don't eat
Hot
all the
dogs,
foods you
whatever.
Italian, Mexican, whatever.
Sure.
Um, so yeah, that's exactly right. Enterprises, I mean, it's a very rare enterprise that will do that. I worked at one Capital One, that did go all in on public cloud and now runs its entire estate up in AWS. But that's a rarity, not a commonality.
Anything else in terms of the future of cloud native, maybe a milestone or something we should be looking for in the next 1, 3, 5 years or so?
Well, I mean, I think that a greater proportion of applications, and as I mentioned, net new applications, I think will increasingly trend toward cloud native, will increasingly trend toward being deployed into public cloud environments. And, you know, over time, and that time can be measured in many, many years, witness the ongoing lifespan of mainframe applications, but an increasing proportion of the overall portfolio will end up being cloud native just because of the, you know, the overall growth and the eventual retirement of some portion of the traditional applications. So, you know, it's like more of the same going into the future. There won't be you know, a date, you know, 2027, everything will be cloud native. That won't happen. We'll just see increasing ongoing kinds of things. You know, it's like any dramatic change in environment. It doesn't happen overnight. You know, it's like, you know, Apple came out with the iPhone in 2007. It wasn't like 2010, everyone had a smartphone and got rid of their landline. But, you know, if you look today, here it is 15 years later, you know, probably 3/4 of the people in the world or half the people in the world carry a smartphone. And I'm excuse me, I'm guessing landlines have, you know, are a very small proportion of that, you know, compared to what they were in the past. So it's an incremental, ongoing kind of thing. And that's what I expect we'll see is continued growth in cloud native.
Interesting. Bernard, I think you said it. Good stuff. Thanks for sharing your expertise today. Very much appreciate it.
James, thank you so much again for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.